Your 2027 Social Security check is officially on track for a pretty noticeable boost. But here's the catch. There is a massive, hidden $700 bill coming that could literally wipe out your entire raise before it even hits your bank account. Right now, major advocacy groups are mapping out a solid increase based on current inflation trends, and honestly, it sounds like a lifeline. But when you combine the reality of how the government actually calculates this raise with a brutal upcoming change to your medical deductions, well, it creates a really tough financial reality. In this explainer, we're unpacking the exact math the government is using right now, uncovering the specific deductions quietly waiting in the wings for 2027, and showing you exactly why that promised raise might actually leave you further behind.
So, let's talk numbers. If you look at the latest estimates from AARP and the Senior Citizens League, they're forecasting a cost of living adjustment, your COLA, of somewhere between 3.6 and 3.8% for 2027. What does that actually mean for your bottom line? Well, for the average retired worker who's currently receiving just over $2,000, a 3.6% bump translates to roughly $75 extra every single month. That brings the average monthly check up to about $2,103. On paper, a jump like that is significantly higher than the 2.8% increase we saw previously. It sounds like a really solid win, right? But before you start budgeting that extra cash, you have to ask yourself one absolutely critical question.
Will you actually see a single dime of it? Seriously, will you feel that $75 in your wallet? Because right now, the foundation of that 3.6% projection is incredibly fragile. You see, the recent inflation numbers showed a bizarre, highly unusual dip in June. Why? Almost entirely because gas prices cooled off at the pump. And analysts will tell you that's a historically rare trend for early summer. The government is relying heavily on this temporary dip to build their projection models. But your everyday life isn't dictated just by the price of unleaded gasoline, especially when Medicare is quietly building a $700 hurdle into your 2027 budget. In just a minute, I'll show you exactly how much Medicare is taking out. But to understand how we got here, we first have to look at the deeply flawed formula deciding your initial raise.
The entire metric dictating your raise is called the CPI-W. Think of it as the government's official shopping list. It stands for the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. Notice a glaring omission there? Yeah, it doesn't say retirees anywhere on that title. Surprisingly, this metric was originally designed decades ago, back during World War I, to help negotiate wage increases for shipyard workers. We're talking about a vastly different economy. It tracks the spending habits of younger, working-age people living in cities, placing a massive weight on things like gasoline and commuting costs. That is exactly why that June gas price drop skewed the numbers so heavily. It severely misaligns with what you actually buy. You probably aren't spending the bulk of your fixed income commuting to a downtown office. You're spending it on necessities that this century-old metric continually ignores.
And this brings us to a massive reality gap. While the official narratives are celebrating cooling gas prices, the reality for retirees paints a starkly different picture. The things you actually consume, groceries, housing, electricity, out-of-pocket healthcare, they are surging. Older Americans feel inflation acutely because, let's be honest, there's almost zero margin to absorb these hits. And the data backs this up dramatically. Right now, current Social Security checks fall about $675 short of the actual average monthly cost of living. So that projected $75 raise, it isn't extra padding. It's immediately swallowed up by the surging baseline costs of your groceries and housing before the ink on your check even dries.
Let's bring this down to the human cost of this mismatch. Shannon Benton over at the Senior Citizens League puts it bluntly. She notes that more than half of seniors already cannot afford basic living standards, forcing many to skip vital doctor's appointments simply because of the costs. This isn't just some abstract economic theory. This is a daily survival crisis for millions. Their survey estimates an astonishing 57% of seniors are surviving on less than $2,000 a month, and even more concerning, 13% are scraping by on less than $1,000. When Social Security was first signed into law, the whole intention was to protect citizens from the brutal peaks and valleys of inflation. But right now, that safety net is tearing, and unfortunately, global events are threatening to pull that net even tighter.
We also have to factor in the Middle East energy wildcard. Ongoing geopolitical tensions, particularly around Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, hold the global oil supply in a very delicate balance. Because the CPI-W is so heavily weighted toward energy, any geopolitical spike in the Middle East flips your economic script completely. Sure, higher oil prices might bump your official COLA percentage slightly higher, but the resulting surge in your everyday expenses, like the cost of transporting food driving up your grocery bill or the cost to heat your home, will violently outpace that raise. And remember, that's all before the automatic healthcare deductions even take their cut.
You see, a raise in your Social Security check doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's immediately subjected to automatic deductions for your Medicare coverage, and this is a crucial blind spot for millions of retirees relying on these early projections. You hear the headline that benefits are going up by 3.6%, and you mentally add that cash right into your bank account. But the federal government gives with one hand and collects premiums with the other. The Medicare trustees have already run the estimates for 2027, and what they're preparing is a structural hurdle that will effectively neutralize your cost of living adjustment.
This hurdle comes in two distinct steps. Step 1. Your baseline Medicare Part B premium is projected to climb to roughly $209.50 a month. That's an automatic $6.60 monthly bite taken directly out of that $75 raise. That alone is frustrating, but step 2 is the real budget breaker. The Medicare Part D drug deductible is projected to skyrocket up to an agonizing $700 in 2027. Just let that sink in for a second. A $700 out-of-pocket barrier you have to clear just for your medications. If you're surviving on a fixed income, an upfront cost like that doesn't just eat your monthly raise. It forces you to dip into dwindling savings just to maintain your baseline health.
The window to prepare for this is closing fast. We're currently right in the middle of the crucial tracking phase. The government measures that flawed CPI-W data strictly through July, August, and September. Those 3 months alone dictate your financial reality for the entire following year. Then you need to circle October 14th on your calendar. That's the day the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the final September data and the official set-in-stone 2027 COLA is announced to the public. There are no appeals, there are no adjustments. Whatever number drops on October 14th is an immovable deadline dictating exactly what will lock into your payouts starting in January 2027.
So, when you stack that promised $75 raise against a $6.60 premium hike and a compounding $700 drug deductible, the illusion completely shatters. Instantly, that premium is skimmed right off the top. Then, you're hit with a crushing $700 annual hurdle for your Part D medications. Factor in the existing $675 monthly cost of living shortfall due to surging food and housing costs, and the big picture becomes starkly clear. You aren't actually moving forward. At best, you're furiously treading water, and for many, slowly sinking under the weight of healthcare costs that the government inflation metric just entirely ignores.
Which leaves us with one inescapable, really provocative question. How are you going to bridge the gap? Because the math is clear. Relying solely on the government's cost of living adjustment is a losing battle. The 2027 COLA might offer a temporary psychological boost, but the underlying mechanics of Medicare hikes and flawed inflation tracking guarantee it will never be enough to truly keep pace with your reality. Look, you can't control the Middle East oil supply, and you certainly can't rewrite the CPI-W formula. So what proactive strategies, what secondary income streams, or what strict budgeting shifts are you putting in place right now before October 14th locks in your numbers? The gap is widening, and the time to build your bridge is today.